The Michigan Man Podcast, episode 149. Trey Burke pickpockets Michigan to victory over the Spartans. That and more on this week's show. This is the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. For Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and thanks for joining me this week. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Trey Burke is only a sophomore, but it's clear after this season he will be ready for the big stage, the NBA. So let's enjoy the next couple of weeks watching this incredibly talented player. And who knows, with his talent and leadership, it could be a march of memories for all Wolverine fans. In just a few minutes, basketball beat writer Nick Baumgardner from MLive.com will join us on today's Michigan Gameday as we get ready for the final week of Big Ten play. Before we get to that, let's get our Wolverine warm-ups in. No surprise, it was announced on Monday that Trey Burke is one of 14 finalists for the Oscar Robertson Player of the Year award. The winner will be announced at the Final Four in Atlanta next month. Coach Brady Hoke announced this week that former Wolverine standout Roy Manning will join his staff in the capacity of linebacker coach. Roy returns home to replace Coach Jerry Montgomery, who left in February to join the staff at Oklahoma. If Michigan hockey wants to keep their NCAA tournament appearance record going, they'll have to do it the hard way by winning the CCHA tournament. No easy task. They'll get started this week by hosting Northern Michigan at Yost in a best-of-3 first-round series. Coach Barnes Arico and the Lady Wolverines dropped their regular season finale down in Columbus this past weekend, but are still primed for their second consecutive trip to the Big Dance. They can enhance their seed with a strong performance in the Big Ten tourney, which gets underway this week in Chicago. It was another good weekend in Florida for number 14 Michigan softball. They dropped a home run fest to Oregon on Sunday and will take advantage of spring break this week to stay down in Florida for a busy week of action. Coach Eric Bakich and baseball climbed to the 500 mark over the weekend as they played in the Snowbird Invitational down in Port Charlotte. They'll be in the Sunshine State all week with a full slate of action also taking advantage of spring break. Number 3 ranked Michigan men's swimming and diving earned their third consecutive Big Ten championship over the weekend down in Bloomington. So congratulations to men's swimming and diving, and we will have more on all of these stories in greater detail coming up later in the show on Wolverine Quick Hits. Trey Burke's beautiful pickpocket of Keith Appling led Michigan to a huge and much-needed win on Sunday at Chrysler Center. This week it's on the road to Purdue, and then back on Sunday for a monster of a regular season finale with the Hoosiers. There will be, of course, a lot on the line come Sunday. Next up on Michigan Game Day, we are going to be joined by Wolverine beat writer Nick Baumgardner from MLive.com, so stick around here on the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. Back with us on Michigan Game Day, basketball beat writer Nick Baumgardner from MLive. Great to have you back, Nick.
Good to be with you, Mike.
Well, Nick, they say big-time players show up in big games. Trey Burke proved again Sunday that he's truly a big-time, big-moment kind of a player, didn't he?
Yeah, that was, I wrote this morning, Trey's had some statistical games that were probably a lot better. Not to say that statistically and on paper he didn't have a great game, but, he's had a 30-point game. He's had some 12-assist games, things of that nature. But 21, 8 assists, 5 steals, those are all huge. Obviously, he needs every one of them, but I thought that was his best game. I really did. Just given the moment, given the situation, given his, the late game plays that he made to just basically save the team. And, it was just one of those things where you looked at it and you said, that's probably an effort if he decides to leave at the end of the year, which, there's a good chance he will, and there'd be nothing wrong with that, that may be an effort in a game that you look back 5 years from now and you say, I remember when he saved Michigan against Michigan State. I mean, he became, I think, a leader, an unquestioned leader, I think, and that was the question on him was, could he be, a guy who kind of carried this team and led this team when they really, really needed him the most. And, for one day at least, he absolutely proved he could do it. And, he carried them. It looked like this meant a ton to him, which sometimes you don't see a lot from him, the emotion. You don't see a ton from Trey. But, he wanted it bad, and you could tell he wanted it bad. It meant a lot to him, and when he wants it bad, the team wants it bad. And I think that was, worth noting, and he proved a lot last night, no question about it.
Well, Nick, Trey said after the game that he and seniors Josh Bartleston and Corey Person called a players-only meeting last Thursday. I guess it was at the Pizza Hut when they were all together. And, leadership has been an issue with this team. You've written about that. A lot of other folks have all season. It's been a big question as this season has progressed. Even though he's only a sophomore and he's such a great player, do you think Trey Burke has to assume the rest of the way a more vocal leadership role with this team?
Yeah, absolutely, I do. I think that, they've talked all year about how, their leaders are, Josh Bartleston's a captain, and some of the seniors that don't play a lot are also, vocal guys in the locker room. But, that's fine, and I think that they've probably done a nice job and everything, but Burke's the best player. And he's the guy on the court with the ball in his hands all the time. He's the guy everybody looks to, and he has to be. In my opinion, I thought the whole way he had to be the guy that led the team. He had to be the guy that was the, vocal guy on the floor, the emotional leader. Or they weren't going to go anywhere. Because when certain people talk, I'm sure when the seniors talk, everybody listens. But when he talks, everyone has to listen. Everyone has to respect him because he's the best player on the team, maybe the best player in the country. So for him to do that and show that he was willing to do it in a big moment when no one had done it in the previous month was so big for him, I think, development-wise. And, could potentially be big for the team, going down the stretches into March because they're going to need somebody on the floor when it's not going well to continue to pull everything together. And he does everything else for them. That was maybe the one thing that I thought he was lacking in his game, and that was that leadership spark, or whatever you want to call it, toughness. And he did it all last night. I mean, he completely saved them. I mean, they were on the verge of another collapse, and it was going to look really, really bad. I mean, could you imagine if they lost that game? It would have looked terrible. Mm-mm. He found a way, and that's huge for this team, and he needs to do that, and he needs to continue to do that going forward.
When we talk about the leadership role and Trey assuming some of that leadership role, you think about how young this team really is, playing 5 freshmen, and Trey Burke's only a sophomore. We know he's already there as a great player. Usually a team can look to their seniors who are on the floor for leadership, but it is asking a lot for Trey Burke to evolve possibly into that guy.
Yeah, it kind of is. I mean, you ask a lot of him anyway because he's so young. But, he's just been, like last year, he was a player, he made plays, he scored a lot of points. Like you said, they had Novak and Douglas who could kind of rally the team. But even then, those guys are terrific leaders, but you saw at the end of the season, they were limited. They could only do so much on the court. There was a lot of, how hard they played, I think, was an example, and all those types of things. But they couldn't take a game over and charge everybody else to make them play up to their level. When Burke forces everyone to play up to his level, that's a pretty high level. So, it's higher than Zach and Stu could go, and that's just talent. I mean, there's nothing anybody can do about that. That's just how it is. So, and I think Hardaway's in the same boat, and and Tim did not play well offensively yesterday, but I thought he defended very well. So really, both of those guys, I think, were intense. They had a tone about them from the beginning of the game, and they just weren't going to let the rest of the team kind of dip. And I think that was something that you'd seen in the past, especially in that last 5 minutes against Penn State. Body language fell apart. Nobody upped the ante and said, let's just, forget this, pull it together, and let's win the game. When they were collapsing against Michigan State, Trey Burke continued to stay steady. And, making that play at half court, against Keith Appling, that's just one of the all-time, Appling kind of let his guard down maybe a little bit. Burke, for him to come up with that's just a complete superstar play. And I don't know any other way to call it. It was just an unbelievable play and an unbelievable moment. And, it was just one of those plays people will probably remember for a long, long time.
Yeah, I think so. That was as good a pick as I've seen in a long time. You know, you mentioned Tim Hardaway Jr. just a moment ago, Nick. He got really good looks yesterday. He was working hard, and you're right on the defensive end. I thought he was working his butt off. Again, on the offensive end, working to get his shots, good looks, but he never found a groove from the perimeter. No one did yesterday. Is his hot and cold play still one of the major concerns heading down the stretch?
Absolutely. I think that, he was so good for, 6-7 games, and really up until the middle of February, for the whole season, he was terrific. Offensively, he continued to be consistent. He was at 15 points a game every night, and he was shooting the ball, 50% from the floor, 40% from three. And lately, it's just, he had a nice night against Penn State from the floor, but in all these other games, especially last night, and he's getting good looks, like you said. He's continued to be consistent. Nothing's falling, and you have to wonder, maybe will he shoot his way out of that, or will that continue to be something that plagues him like it did last year for long periods of time? But I will say the one difference with him is that he defended. And last year, when that happened, he didn't play defense. He didn't do anything. He just fell apart mentally, and he gave them nothing. He was out there running laps. If he's missing shots, he's not doing anything. Last night, if you look at the box score, Brandon Dawson had a extremely quiet game. He did almost next to nothing. I think he scored 2 or 3 points and had 4 rebounds or something like that. Played 30 minutes, whatever it was. He did very little, and he was very big in the game in East Lansing. And last night, Hardaway spent, after Stauskas got hurt, LeVert spent a lot of time guarding Gary Harris, and that meant Hardaway was on Dawson. So Tim guarded Brandon Dawson and shut him down. He out-rebounded him. I mean, he came up with big rebounds in big moments when nobody else could grab one. He found a way to grab one. So I think the encouraging part of it, outside of there is a discouraging part for Michigan. I think the encouraging part with Hardaway is that he was able to find a way to contribute one way or another. The shot wasn't going, but he continued to shoot and try. He tried to get looks. He didn't just quit trying. And he defended. He had some grit about him, and he had some toughness about him, and he was one of those guys too. Even though the shots, nobody was hitting shots. They were both 12, and I don't know when the last time he hadn't. It's been at least a decade since they haven't made a 3-pointer in a game. But he found a way to contribute one way or another. But on the defensive end, the shots have got to start going back in for him. He doesn't have to make everything, but he's got to do something. I mean, he doesn't have to be like he was against Ohio State, where he carried him that night. But he has to be a 15-point-a-game scorer going forward, or you're gonna run into these nail biters and games that you might not be able to pull out.
Well, Nick, February, as we know, was a tough stretch for Michigan, going 3-4. There was the blowout in East Lansing, a deflating loss in Madison, and then that meltdown last week at Penn State. And this team was reeling heading into the state game on Sunday. And the fans and the media were questioning their toughness, and they knew that. Trey Burke mentioned that after the game yesterday. What does yesterday's win tell us about this team, if anything?
Well, I don't think you can get too overly... I don't think you can jump too much over to the positive side just yet, because there still are issues. But what it did say to me was, when they want to, they can play tough. They can play, they can have some grit about them. There is an edge somewhere in there, and that was we didn't know if that existed. I think for a month, you said we said, and I talked to you about this. We said they need to play with more toughness. They can't play soft. They have to play tougher. They have to have an edge. And you say all that stuff, not really knowing if that's something that's just you either have it or you don't. And we said all that, not knowing if they did have it. We wondered, maybe it's not there. Maybe they don't have any of that because they hadn't shown it. Well, last night they showed it. They showed that it's there. It does exist. They can play with grit. They played against a team that wanted to bully them and wanted to beat them up. And they took some punches, and Michigan State, killed them on the glass again, and, physically kind of exerted their will. But they punched back, and they took some punches, and they were still standing at the end. And I think that, they withstood that run, too, as well, and then found a way. So I think that's, from a mental edge standpoint, that's something that they can look at and say, okay, well, we do know we can do that. We do have guys. Karis LeVert grew up. He played tough. He played harder than he did in the first time out. Mitch McGarry is growing up. He played with some physicality. He was tough. Jordan Morgan's healthier now, so he was tough inside at times. So I think that what it does is it shows them that, it shows us, I guess, that they do have some sort of an edge to them. It might not be, they might not be the 89 bad boys or anything out here, but they can stand up for themselves against a physical team. They can beat a physical team. Even Michigan State was struggling, no question about it, but they can do it. I mean, and that's something that they hadn't done yet. They hadn't beaten the top 3 Big Ten teams. They feasted on the bottom part and didn't do anything against the top. But finally now they've gotten that win against the top tier team. They've also beaten Ohio State at home. So they've proven to themselves that they can at least do that. And I think that's so big, going down the stretch into that last game against Indiana, into the Big Ten tournament, and obviously beyond. And they absolutely had to have something like this. And they just had to have that game, because if you lose that game, and you're looking at, in my opinion, I thought you were looking at maybe 4 losses in your last 4 going into the Big Ten. I mean, which would have been just a debacle. I think this just gives them completely new life mentally going forward. Obviously, you got to turn right back around Wednesday against Purdue, but it was just it was must win, absolutely must win. They couldn't lose it, and they found a way.
I think you're absolutely dead on there. And Nick, part of the toughness issue or question that a lot of us had was on the defensive end all year. It just seemed this team just could not put together a sustained effort, and we're just not bodying up and playing tough on the defensive end. But I thought Sunday it was a sustained effort. The energy level on that end of the floor was much better, and that really was, to me, the key in the game.
Yeah, it was. And if I think went back to toughness, I thought, and this is something that was interesting, Nick Stauskas gets hurt, he leaves the game, and I thought it forced Michigan to adjust its lineup and get a little tougher. Because, Stauskas does a lot for them, but he is not a great defender. He's probably one of their worst perimeter defenders. So him not being in there forced Levert to play, and I think they found out that he might be one of their best, perimeter defenders, and it forced Morgan to play on the floor with another big, and I think that showed, that they were tougher when that happened, and then, Morgan's healthy, and, he's their best, big man on the ball screen. I think McGarry kind of played up to his level. I think McGarry saw what Morgan was doing and said, I can do that too. So they did a great job on the ball screen, as opposed to the other night where they didn't defend one of them against Penn State. And, for the last really probably 35 minutes, they did not play well in the first 5-6 minutes of this game, but really after, midway point of the first half, they started to defend, and they figured it out, whatever it was. The offensive rebounds were brutal early. Michigan State was getting easy shots. They were stepping into wide open threes. It looked like a lot like it did in the first game, but a lot of that went away. Michigan State was 1 of 11 from 3 in the second half. They still rebounded, but I mean, that's one of those, Michigan State just rebounds against everybody, and Michigan's just not as big. So that's just part of the deal. So you have to find a way to overcome that, and they did. But more importantly, Michigan State wasn't taking open shots in the second half. Everything was contested. Shots at the basket were contested. 3-pointers were contested. There were no jumpers, and it was just one of those things that probably the best defensive effort they've had all year. Maybe Michigan State played rough offensively, but Michigan doesn't care about that. They defended, and you can't take it away from them, because 84 points against Penn State was inexcusable. But to come back and hold Michigan State to 57, a couple days later, it's kind of remarkable. I didn't see it coming. I don't think a lot of us did. But they, again, they prove they can do it. And the same thing with the toughness part. They prove they can play some defense, and mentally that'll be big for them going forward. They'll just have to continue to do it and be consistent.
No, I think we all agree. Seeing the way that Michigan played defense yesterday buoys everyone's spirits. But, on the glass is something that still troubles me. Again, you mentioned State, they're going to rebound against anybody. Keeping them off the offensive glass is a pain. But at this late stage of the season, I know people said, well, maybe Coach Beilein's going to throw a bigger lineup at the Spartans. But what realistically can Coach Beilein do to, change that at this point of the season?
I think he did play bigger some. I don't think he wants to totally go all in for whatever reason, although I would do it if I were him. Against bigger teams, I would definitely play bigger. Against some of the smaller teams, I can understand why you would want to go smaller, because I think you have better personnel than them, and you can outrun them. But what it was is you just had to, you had to say in the Michigan State game, Adrian Payne has developed into such a terrific player. He's, in my opinion, an NBA-ready power forward, and he's going to do whatever he wants, and that's whatever. You're going to have to survive that. But there's no reason why you couldn't defend Derek Nix. And that was something I thought in East Lansing. Jordan Morgan, Mitch McGarry, John Horford, Derek Nix is not better than any of those 3 players. Nix had a tremendous game up there. No one guarded him. And that was one of those things I think you challenge your bigs to say, when you are on the floor, you have to play like a big. You can't, if Payne is a terrific player, he can shoot, he can do all these things. If he has 17 and 12, I think you can live with that. But if Derek Nix has 17 and 12, you've got a problem. And that's part of the issue, I think. And it was just, to a man, you had to be tougher. You had to make it more difficult on guys, even if they were a little bit bigger than you. I think that Michigan is who it is. And Beeline, I think, probably told them that. We are who we are. This is what we're going to do. This is who got us here. This is what we're going to roll with. But you guys have to be tougher to a person. If Stauskas wasn't in the game, but I think the challenge to him would have been, if you're going to guard Gary Harris, you need to do it. Because, and Gary Harris is another one of these guys. He's got NBA talent, but you're going to need to figure out a way to do it. Flynn Robinson, you're going to have to figure out a way to body up Payne or make him run with you or do something to create a mismatch there and do the things that you do well. And I think that was something that they didn't do in February. It was get back to what you do and what you know how to do. They ran the floor. Burt controlled the pace of the game, and the pace of the game was slower, but he dictated that, and he made sure that it continued to run the way he wanted it to run. And I think it was just a lot about getting back to doing the things that you do best and playing within yourself and not trying to do too much. They got down 5 or 6, whatever it was, and nobody was out there trying to make a 6-point shot. So I think calming down and just settling down and doing some of the things you did earlier in the season, that was the biggest part for them. And it was a huge win and one they really, really needed.
Our guest on Michigan Game Day is Michigan basketball beat writer Nick Baumgardner from MLive.com. And Nick, as we head into the last week of the regular season, then we have the Big Ten tourney on the horizon, and of course the NCAAs. Other than Trey Burke, who else, in your opinion, holds the key to Michigan making a sustained run in the tournament?
Well, I think it's, like we said, Tim Hardaway has to play big. I think both of those guys have to be go-to type scorers. No question about it. If they're not, then you've got the shoes. And then I think Stauskas has to get healthy. I'm not sure. We don't know really what happened with him yet. We'll probably find out more of that tomorrow. Or maybe even today. He has to get healthier. And Glenn Robinson needs to. He seems to be playing a little bit better than he was in the middle of February. Stauskas, Robinson, Hardaway, Burke have got to be on top of their game. Obviously, Morgan's healthy again, and what you're going to get from him. But those 4 guys are your potential 1, 2, 3, and 4 scorers. And that's when we talked about this too, Mike. When they were, dominating people, they had 4 options on offense. They had 4 guys that could go for 15. And when you legitimately have 4 guys that can do that, and everyone has to respect all 4 of them, they are impossible to guard. They just frankly are. Because if you have to respect Stauskas, then you can't leave him, and you got to play 4-on-4. Same with Hardaway, same with Burke, same with Robinson. So those 4 guys have to find a way to offensively get back to doing the things they were doing. And honestly, against some teams, it becomes easy for Michigan because they just outrun you, and they just have more talent. They have more offensive talent than, I would say, 99% of the country. There's very few teams that can boast the offense that these guys can when everything is clicking, and we've seen that. The defense was such an issue. They just need to play, in my opinion, they have to play average defense. They don't have to play elite defense. It just has to be good, average to good, because the offense, even when it's off some nights, is still good enough to win. So those guys offensively have to be at their best, and they have to, at least care a little bit on defense, and that's the key, because that's who they are, and that's what they've won with, and that's what they'll continue to win or lose with going forward.
Well, Nick, Sunday's game, it was only one game, albeit against your bitter rival, but it was a game that the Wolverines needed for so many reasons. Do you think, though, we're overstating it when we say this is the kind of a win that could propel this team to a strong finish?
No, I don't think it's totally overstating it. I think, like I said, it all depends on what you do with it, but it is one that was a mental hurdle for them. They had to beat a physical, tough, elite team one way or another, any way they could. They had to do it because they had not done it yet. I mean, they beat Ohio State at home, and that was a nice win, but that was it. I mean, they had some decent wins in the non-conference, but that was so long ago now. It was a what have you done for me lately? And lately you've done nothing. I mean, you've just struggled. And mentally, you had to get over that and remember, they have all the tools they need. They're not lacking any type of personnel. It was just a matter of will or, edge or toughness, whatever. They just had to prove to themselves that, this could happen. And, going forward, I think the outlook looks completely different to where you go into Purdue and you know that it's a difficult environment, and Purdue's playing well. They beat Wisconsin yesterday, but you at least have the confidence in that, in knowing that you can go in there and do something. And then when Indiana comes back, it's the same kind of deal. You're not, hey, we beat Michigan State, we were physical with them, we outplayed them. You can take that same attitude, you can twist it around for Indiana, and you see what happens. And I thought before the game, I thought they would lose against Michigan State, and I thought there was a real chance they were going to lose the last three after Penn State. I don't think that anymore. I think they proved a lot. They changed some minds, but again, this has been an up and down thing, so it's going to have to be, whatever the real team is going to have to step up and show what they are over these next couple of games and into the Big Ten tournament. And they have to be playing their best going into the NCAAs. Last year they weren't. They were not playing their best at all. It was probably the opposite. And that they have to avoid that. Maybe hope that they got the worst out of the way in February, which is, no big deal at the end of the day if you can play your best in March. I think that's the goal, and that's the key right now.
No, we're not going to have long to wait and find out. Last question, Nick. There may be a few players in college basketball better than Trey Burke, and I suppose that's debatable. Mm-hmm. But can you think of any single player that means more to his team than Trey Burke means to Michigan?
No. When we frame it that way, and that's the argument, that's something I talked about to somebody the other day. When we talk, if it's a most valuable player award, which I think it's technically a player of the year award, which is just the most outstanding player in the country, and he would be definitely in the running for that as well. But if we're talking most valuable, and that to me that means the guy that if you took him off of his team, what would happen? There's nobody in the country that means more to their team individually than Burke, because if he's not on that team, I don't know what happens. I mean, he does a little bit or a lot of everything, for them. Victor Oladipo is a terrific player at Indiana. But if you took him away from Indiana, they'd probably still be okay. I mean, he does a lot, but he doesn't control every play. The ball's not in his hands at all times. He's not guarding their team's point guard every time down the floor. I mean, Burke for 38, 39 minutes every night is the key to everything. And it's been that way for 40 games, going back to last season, 50 games, whatever it's been. And, more often than not, they've won a ton when he's been here. More often than not, he's answered the bell. And, as far as value goes, there isn't one in my book that's any more valuable. I think he's that special of a player. Like I said earlier, who knows what will happen after the season, but, Michigan fans, I think, would be wise to soak every minute of this in, because he's a guy that you won't ever get back when he does decide to leave. He's one of those elite guys, and he's one of those guys that you'll remember for a long, long time, and just a terrific player and a lot of fun to watch, and one I think Michigan will cherish for years to come.
Well, amen to that. I think most Wolverine fans, after the last two seasons, cannot argue that point.
No doubt.
Our guest on the show today has been Michigan basketball beat writer Nick Baumgardner from MLive. And Nick, we're heading down the stretch, and hopefully the team takes it into March, makes a big run, and we can get you back on the show to talk about some more good things.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mike.
It is a busy week on the Wolverine athletic scene. Coming up next on Wolverine Quick Hits, to wrap it up for another week, we'll take a look at that here on the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. On Wolverine Quick Hits today, University of Michigan sophomore guard Trey Burke was announced on Monday as one of 14 finalists for the 2013 Oscar Robertson Player of the Year trophy presented by AFLAC and the United States Basketball Writers Association. The recipients will be announced on Friday, April 5, 2013 in Atlanta during the Final Four. In addition to the Robertson Award, Burke is a top 12 finalist for the Bob Cousy Top Point Guard Award, a top 25 finalist for the John R. Wooden Player of the Year Award, a top 30 finalist for the Naismith Player of the Year Award, and is on the watch list for the John R. Wooden All-American Team. As well he should be. Michigan has hired former Wolverines linebacker Roy Manning as an assistant coach. Wolverines coach Brady Hoke made that announcement on Monday. Manning will coach outside linebackers. Defensive coach Greg Madison is now the defensive line coach as well as being the defensive coordinator. Manning played in 37 games at Michigan from 2001 to 2004. The former Saginaw High School star was in 21 NFL games over the next 3 years with Green Bay, Houston, and Cincinnati. Hoke had Manning as a graduate assistant in 2011 in his first year leading the Wolverines. Manning leaves Northern Illinois, where he was hired in January after coaching running backs at Cincinnati last season. Manning fills a spot on Hoke's staff vacated by defensive line coach Jerry Montgomery, who left last month for the same job at Oklahoma. After skating to a 1-1 tie against Ferris State Saturday night, the University of Michigan hockey team scored the lone shootout marker from senior captain A.J. Trey on senior night for the extra point at Yost Ice Arena. Trey beat Ferris State goaltender C.J. Mott gloveside, and freshman goaltender Steve Racine stopped all three Bulldog chances. Racine allowed one goal for the second straight night, making 24 saves in the contest. Racine, who made his first start since December 4 games ago and has posted a 3-0-1 record over that span, stoned a Ferris State breakaway with less than 20 seconds left in overtime to force the shootout. The Wolverines will face Northern Michigan in the best-of-3 first-round series to begin the CCHA playoffs. The games will be played this weekend at Yost Ice Arena. Michigan heads into the first round of the CCHA with a 13-18-3 overall record, 10-15-3 in the CCHA. Women's basketball closed the regular season with a 66-55 loss at Ohio State on Sunday at Value City Arena. Michigan fell behind in the first 5 minutes and could never catch up in the 11-point defeat. Senior forward Rachel Sheffer led the offense with 19 points on 9 for 14 shooting. Senior guard Kate Thompson and senior forward Sam Arnold each chipped in 10 points as Michigan shot 50%, 23 for 46 from the field. Ohio State shot 54.3%, 25 for 46 from the floor, and forced 12 Michigan turnovers. Michigan is now the number 5 seed for the upcoming Big Ten tournament and will face number 12 seed Indiana this Thursday at 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, 7:30 here in the Detroit area. The tournament will run through this weekend and be held at the Sears Center in Hoffman Estates, Illinois. The Wolverines head into this week's tournament with an overall record of 20 wins and 9 losses, 9-7 in the Big Ten. The number 14 ranked University of Michigan softball team fell to number 10 ranked Oregon on Sunday to close the Citrus Classic. The Ducks prevailed 13-4 in 6 innings on the strength of 6 home runs. Oregon jumped out to a 1-0 lead in the top of the first against sophomore Sarah Dreisinger. It looked like the Wolverines would keep pace when freshman Sierra Lawrence belted a solo home run to left center in the bottom of the second to even the score. Lawrence homered in her previous at-bat in the 6th inning against James Madison on Saturday. The Ducks regained the lead in their half of the third on a home run and 2 base hits. The home run was just the second Dreisinger had allowed in 95 innings this season. Then in the 4th, Oregon hit back-to-back home runs and added another run on 2 hits. Senior Stephanie Spearman relieved Dreisinger and got a strikeout to end the inning. Oregon led 6-1 before U of M batted in the 4th. The Wolverines fought back in the bottom of the inning, converting a walk by junior Caitlin Blanchard, a Lawrence base hit, and 2 Oregon errors into 3 runs and closing the gap to 6-4 going into the 5th inning. The Ducks hit 3 more round-trippers in the final 2 innings and built a 13-4 lead to eventually earn a run rule decision in the 6th inning. Michigan will continue its spring break trip this week with a full slate of action. The Wolverines again ranked number 14 heading into this week's play with an overall record of 13 wins and 5 losses. In baseball, senior Patrick Biondi became the program's career stolen base leader on Saturday as the University of Michigan baseball team earned a doubleheader split with St. Louis on Day 2 of the Snowbird Invitational at the North Charlotte Regional Park. The Wolverines fell to the Billikens 8-5 in Game 1 and shut out SLU 11-0 in the nightcap. Then on Sunday, sophomore Trent Skutnik from Temperance, Michigan struck out 5 in 7 innings of 2-run ball, making a 1-run first and 2-run second stand up for the University of Michigan baseball team in a 5-2 win over Georgetown to conclude play in the Snowbird Invitational, that again on Sunday afternoon. Skutnik allowed just 5 hits and 2 runs with 5 strikeouts and a walk in his 7-inning start. Skutnik had 1, 2, 3 innings in the 2nd, 6th, and 7th inning to earn his first win of the season. Senior Ben Ballantyne struck out a batter in the 8th, and classmate Kyle Clark pitched a perfect 9th with a pair of strikeouts for his 2nd save of the season. Biondi, O'Neill, Cronenworth, and White had 2 hits apiece for the Wolverines, while White scored a pair of runs. O'Neill added his 6th double of the season, while White now has 3 triples in 2013. Michigan will also take advantage of spring break for a full slate of action this week down in Florida. The Wolverines again climbed to the 500 mark for first-year coach Eric Bakich with 5 wins and 5 losses. And finally, the number 3 ranked University of Michigan men's swimming and diving team captured its 3rd straight Big Ten championship on Saturday inside the Councilman Billingsley Aquatic Center at the University of Indiana. The Wolverines won 12 Big Ten titles during the 4-day session, 7 individual, 5 relay, including event wins from junior Connor Yeager in the 1650-yard freestyle, sophomore Bruno Ortiz in the 100-yard freestyle, and freshman Dylan Bosch in the 200-yard butterfly. Michigan scored 899 points, beating second-place Indiana by 235 points. At the conclusion of the meet, head coach Mike Bottom was named Big Ten Swimming Coach of the Year, while Bosch claimed Big Ten Freshman of the Year. So congratulations to Michigan's Big Ten champion men's swimming and diving team. Next up, the NCAAs. This is an incredibly busy time of the year for Michigan athletics and, of course, for we fans. You can keep up on all of the news and conversation in just one place, right here at GBM Wolverine. Visit www.gbmwolverine and sign up for membership today. You'll get email reminders when a story is published, and membership will also get you into our message board so you can see what other Wolverine fans are saying and even participate yourself. So join today at www.gbmwolverine.com. For all of our listeners who get the show from iTunes, don't forget to give us a review. It only takes a minute, but it does help a lot. The show is also available in the iTunes App Store and the Android App Store, which is at Amazon.com. You can also follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @TheMichiganMan, and like us on our Facebook page, The Michigan Man Podcast. Thanks again to Michigan basketball beat writer Nick Baumgardner from MLive for being our guest today. Next week we get primed for the Big Ten tournament. Our scheduled guest is Rod Beard, Wolverine beat writer from the Detroit News, so I hope you'll join us for that and all of the latest news on the Michigan athletic front. So until next time, have a great Wolverine week. There's plenty to enjoy this time of the year. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for listening to the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. You can find us on the web at www.gbmwolverine.com. That's www.gbmwolverine.com. For audio posts or other fan feedback, please call our listener line at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Email fan feedback to the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan. The Michigan Man Podcast is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!